Hi, everyone. I'm Paul from CAP, and welcome to episode 4 of Palagisgot of a pre-MPDC lecture series. Great. My specialized lecture will be education. So, beyond the board, I'll look at education in the Philippines, presented by Paul Domingo. So, before you try to dive in terms of the lecture, for example. Let's first have an overview what we're going to talk about in this lecture. Firstly, the definition of terms. So just a general discussion what education is and the reimagining of education. So as misconceptions, applications of education, context on Philippine education, and then implications of education. Great. So, definition of terms education is the intentional process of facilitating learning, knowing, acquisition, skill development, values formation, and critical thinking. So, it's definitely just a lifelong endeavor. We've already known this. This is very, very general discussions on what education is about. But in Philippine context, education in the Philippines is perceived as simply more than just the context of skill development and acquisition. It's also a tool for nation building because I think on the context of Philippine education and how our country views education as a whole, there's a lot of context towards how it shapes the moral upbringing of individuals, as well as how we create the cultural responsibility of our learners and of people when they move outside of the academy. I'm going to discuss this later on. But the main point here in education I'd like to all for you to know about is that uh, why re-examine education? It's on the context that I would like you to remove all of your preconceived notions of what education is, what school is, how it's simply just textbooks learning, and how it's about literacies and skills. I want you to throw that all away. Education is not a monolith, it's a dynamic and it's dynamic and contextual. In the Philippines, education shapes the way of how individuals are going to become meaningful members of society, but also minimum meaningful members of their roles within their communities. So in this case, we need to explore how education should be debated, not on the context of learning solely, but also on the context on how it affects fields, relationships, the academe, for example, or how it affects communities. Note the multidimensional nature of education is more than classroom textbooks or degrees. It influences identity, workforce, and civic values. Great. Misconceptions. Misconception simply is that, firstly, education is only about academic achievement. I think a lot of the way debaters try to discuss about education motions, they try to solely stick towards how it affects academic instances in the performance behind schools. I'd like to argue that education and the way they try to assess learning and performance enhanced capabilities of schools, whether or not you're a top performing or an underperforming school, it isn't solely on how you are weighed on academic achievement, such as passers in licensure exams or research published in then within department programs within universities. The reality is that there's holistic development, which includes emotional intelligence, ethics, creativity, and life skills. So this goes back to how education perceives performancely. It's based on liberal arts impacts as well, but on the level of development and the ability for the learner to become a full-fledged researcher, for instance, or the amount of innovation that these things are most likely going to happen. There are multiple aspects towards how education views how schools perform, how learners perform. It's just a matter on what are the most proximate interests that these schools and learners are more likely going to have. So, for example, the level of achievement that is measured by a school in an agricultural community is based on the output based discussions on agriculture. And it differs in places with who are more adjacent to mining. So it really is dependent on the geographical location of these schools. Another misconception is that education ends with a diploma. That's wrong. The reality is education is lifelong. It's reskilling, adult education, and informal learning are vital. So most of the time, education just stop in a diploma. There are other alternatives to get a degree. This looks like TESDAS scholarships, for example, that aim towards technical vocational development, or the alternative learning system that focuses on bridging the condensed version of topics that you miss on in high school, that these are for out of school youths or people who are already in adulthood and try to go back and get that degree or try to get that diploma in high school. And there are so many online courses and certificates that you get based on so many things that have happened after the pandemic, wherein there's so many courses offered by multiple universities online that you just get enough credentials for you to achieve back to the skill that you're trying to hold. Another misconception is that intelligence equals academic performance. There's so many wrong things with that because there's multiple intelligences according to Garner. And these are intrinsic factors that exist already in education. So the main premise of education right now and the learning model that they're trying to do is the EFA, the Education for All. It capitalizes on inclusive education and it tries to integrate all specific education curriculums in terms of different types of intelligence wherein you're kinesthetic in terms of your learning style, where you're more likely going to where learners are more likely able to learn hands-on, or linguistically when learners are more likely able to learn verbally, for example. There's multiple types of ways for you to help these learners encompass their skills. And most, if not, there's a problem with how education tends to miss out on the talents in art, sports, and leadership that are sometimes often undervalued in schools. That's why this is a major misconception in terms of intelligence. It's more than just the academic performance. Next, teachers are the sole authority. There's also another misconception. In an education setting or in a classroom setting, there is there is a right. So going back, there's multiple things within classroom settings and there's problems in the way teachers are perceived. So teachers are the sole authority, but the misconception is that teachers are there to just teach. No, teachers are there to aid you in the way you develop. And teachers, often than not, in socio-economic deprived areas, this looks like areas with less access towards the standardized education that we're so used to. Most often than not, teachers in local and especially in rural communities, in these types of regions and areas, they're perceived as leaders and they're perceived as major factors within the community and how the community deems their guidance as important. So modern education is learner centered. This means that most education is given towards hands-on tasks that learners are more likely necessary into. So you take a look at education right now, it's more on activities, reinforcement, assessments, and hands-on activities wherein you get to see students experiment with the way they handle their tasks. This is often seen in the way you do reportings. Often than not, you're just given your topic and you're just given the instructions towards time limits, for example, how you engage your audience. Often than not, most of these things are just free creativity reign because this is what learner-centered education looks like. It's about how we reshape the community and how we reshape these types of discussions moving forward. So the importance is there's collaborative learning that encourages autonomy and confidence. This is where teachers who become learners in the classroom setting as well, because learners learn from the teacher in the transfer of knowledge and the acquisition that they're most likely going to have. But teachers also learn from their learners as well because this looks like teachers realize the level of skill these kids are more likely going to have and the different type of learning styles they're going to adopt based on the needs of these learners. So this looks like that if you're a teacher in these socio-economic deprived areas, you're more likely going to hop into the distinction of how you're going to teach styles based on the needs of that specific community. Because going back, if you're a teacher teaching in a rural or local community, and especially if you come from these communities, you're perceived as leaders of these communities and you're perceived as major components of that specific community. That's why there's more instances in the collaborative effort with teachers in classroom settings and communication or no community settings, and less on the misconception that they're the sole authority within classrooms. Lastly, only formal education matters. I think there's so many wrongs with that. The reality is learning occurs through experience, culture, community, and media. That's why there are multiple examples such as cultural studies that thrive on the cultural diversity that exists within rural and indigenous communities. Or there's how we understand society and the way we understand how politics operates in media. All of these things are all tied back to how do we teach our learners through education and the level of quality that these people are going to be introduced with education. Because I'd argue that education is one of the most basic foundations aside from family or religion in the eight social institutions that tie back to how you perceive multiple fields in the long run. I'm going to also discuss that later on in this lecture. So keynote, in the Philippines, we've internalized the belief that the smartest kids are always the top of the class, but this neglects the brilliance of athletes, artists, or those who solve practical problems. This looks like who are logical learners or context-based. The Ped and Shed are starting to shift from content-heavy to competency-based approaches, but the mindset shift must also come from us, parents, teachers, and students. So ever since the pandemic, uh, there has been an increase of prioritized subsidies and scholarship grants towards development degrees, science degrees, technology degrees, business degrees, and math degrees. This is because the level of education and in the lens of the Philippines education is more on outcome based, based on competency, performance, and the needs of these communities in those schools. So what happens is there's less incentives for liberal arts majors to get scholarships and subsidies because of the shift that the pandemic has thrusted the Philippines contextually into. So I think right now there's a gradual increase of how scholarships are trying to go back to prioritize multiple fields because there's a need for humanities courses to still be at the helm, and there's also a need for other sports degrees, for example, to come back to the discussion because it all goes back to how we translate towards these discussions in the long run. Let's talk about context of Philippine education then. Great. So the context in Philippine education, it first talk about on applications of education. So STEM fields, there's innovation hubs like UST or in UP Diliman science programs. This can also look like any state university and the way they handle their science programs. So this looks like how there's incentives towards facilities, how all of these facilities towards experimentation, research development, field study applications, all of these subsidies and fundings come to private institutions, but most often than not, the major helm towards these investments, towards these subsidies, come from the Department of Science and Technology and UST. That's why you get on-the-job trainings for people who go to nuclear institutes here in the Philippines or go to medical facilities that are highly equipped because it better suits the fields of expertise that you're taking up to in education, which is also a problem because most often than not, students who learn in rural communities often need to travel outside of their local community just because of the difference of the facilities that are going to happen. And this looks like, for example, even in education, as a learner, as a high schooler from Surigao, I tried to get out of the province and opted into Butuan City because the level of education there is different, because of the level of facilities is more adjacent towards the subsidies that these institutions already experience on. So public policy then, educational backgrounds in law and public administration guiding reforms. most of the legislations and public administrations policies are contingent on the educational backgrounds they're most likely going to learn. So, for example, if you're a rural student coming from your indigenous communities, most likely if you become part of these lawmakers' legislations, you tend to create policies that are contingent to how it creates the trickle down towards these communities. Health as well. It's also the nursing medical schools producing global healthcare workers because the shift towards science and health and development has become rampant and become wide scale within the development. And as well as business, for example, the entrepreneurship education that shapes SMEs and corporate leadership, and the arts and culture wherein they try to preserve the Filipino identity and heritage in humanities that are exclusively only existing right now in the Philippines. Other Asian communities and their humanities courses, they don't try to preserve their cultural their cultural identities through education. It's because there are already rooted cultural implications that exist. Unlike in the Philippines, where even if we try to discuss that education and our cultural studies are already culturally embedded, there's still less incentive for people to talk about that because yun nga, humanities is not as talked about. That's why there's an incentive gradually for the education system to talk about that. Yeah. Let's talk about lenses of Philippine education. So this ties back to how we perceive education overall in the community. Like I said, education in Philippines is perceived outcome based. So it's performance, it's competence, and it's the needs of the community. Those three factors are very important. So on nationalistic lens, so there's emphasis on Filipino identity through Makabayan subjects. That's why you get in basic and secondary education, you get subjects such as Araling Palipunan or yeah, or Makabayan subjects that talk about Filipino identity and how does Filipino identity tie back to you as a Filipino studying, for example. There's mother tongue based multilingual education. So this looks like the mother tongue discussions that happen in elementary. So parang if you're a Bisaya speaker, you're more likely experience Bisaya speaking in MTB, MLE, or if you're from Zamboanga, then most likely this talks about Chavacano. Or if you're in from Surigao, this most likely talks about Surigao. There's also promotion of patriotism and civic duty in Paraling Palipunan and education's pagpapakatao. So even if it's values education, there's still intrinsic nationalistic lenses because that's the common problem here in the Philippines. There's a problem with the way we address our cultural identities that there's already a need for education to strengthen that. When in the first place, this isn't the role of education. This should be the role of how we governments perceive nationalistic identities. Here we have globalization lenses. So, because of globalization, the exchange of trade and discussions that happen on the ground, there's an adoption of K to 12 systems for international comparability. So, you get K to 12 who bridges these problems, or there's an emphasis on English proficiency in STEM subjects in order for us to reach the global standard on how STEM subjects are most likely going to apply in the field. And there's integration of 21st century skills, so communication, digital literacy, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, all of these things factor into 21st century skills. And all of these things are then integrated because of the pandemic and how there is a lack of digitalization and the lack of digital literacy that happens on the ground. So that's why you see wide scale digital movements in rural communities. But the problem is there's less teachers who are able to teach that in the long run. Great. We have economic lenses. So we have senior high school tracks, academic, tech, TVL, sports and arts. It focuses on the specialization because education, the lens of economy in economics, it perceives how these students are going to become functional members in the economy. So they tend to less deviate away from individualized self-fulfillment, but more on the capacity towards development and how we're able to utilize these skills. So there's partnership with TESDA, like I said, in the scholarships towards technical vocational. There's industry for job ready skills. There's focus on entrepreneurship and financial literacy to stimulate economic participation because the lapses in economies are perceived to be solved through the lenses of education. Equity lens, there's ALS for out of school youth, PWDs, and adults, like I talked about earlier. There's inclusive education policies and dependent orders, and there's the special education programs, SPED, that mainly focus on the special needs of learners who are gifted learners, who have mental impairments, who are students with disabilities, and indigenous people's education. These are curriculums most often than not in local communities or rural provinces that try to integrate the indigenous discussions or indigenous values and cultural practices within the education curriculum. So the curriculum in the Philippines isn't just about teaching subjects. It reflects our national goals, economic strategies, and cultural values because the perceived notion in education here in the Philippines is that we try to bridge the gap of problems in the country with the amount of education that we're able to instill with our people. So the nationalistic lens protects our identity in a globalized world. The global lens ensures our learners are competitive abroad. The economic lens targets poverty reduction by aligning education with workforce demands. The equity lens embodies the spirit of inclusive growth, ensuring that every Filipino has access to quality education regardless of their status or location. Challenges then in Philippine education. So there's access and participation. So 1 in 10 Filipino children aged 6 to 17 is out of school. This is a general problem. And I think even in 2024 and 2025, it has increased more. So I think there's 3 out of 10 Filipino children are already out of school. Then there's geographic barriers. There's mountainous terrain, there's isolated areas, there's lack of transportation. So there's varying discussions in the way education in terms of curriculum is perceived. So the education in the Cordillera regions is different than the education in those in Cagayan. It's different in the education those in Davao. There's education difference in Butuan and even in offshore islands such as in Caraga where there's Dinagat Islands, where the education there, their entire schools are centered around marine uh, degrees such as fisheries, engineering, because most often than not, these are the needs that tie back in the community. Because if there's geographic barriers that these communities face, it's because it ties back to their isolation that these communities experience. So because of the isolations, there's a need for these communities to become self-sustaining. That's why there's a lot of schools and education curriculums that are centered towards the needs of these communities, for example. There's gender challenges like early pregnancy, family obligations, safety issues, quality and competency issues. So this is very common. We rank lowest in reading and second lowest in math and science. It's because not because of the problems of education. I think that's a factor, but the major factor is the education setting in the Philippines is still a gradual development towards how we are going to reshape our discussions in the long run. So there's discussions on how we're going to get that more so in the forefront. And there's problems in congested classrooms. One teacher for every 40 to 70 students in urban public schools. So this is a common problem. And then inadequate facilities. So sometimes there are no libraries, there's less labs, or there's less ICT tools in many schools because there's a lot of problems with how we relocate our resources and we distribute that to schools. Sometimes most resources go into top performing schools. Added, they already have private institutions that help aid them. So then there's a problem with how offshore communities or less adjacent communities are going to reach that type of resources in those communities. So parang most of the resource allocation right now is propelled to these types of discussions. Next, there's challenges in equity and systemic inequality. So there's a gap between public and private education. It's a matter of resource allocation. And since there's a lot of co-active buy-in between private educations and public educations, there's disparities on the amount of degrees and courses and programs you're able to provide. That's why most often than not, people opt into private education because it provides a difference in specialized education. Same with public. A lot of state universities right now are trying to reach the global standard of how you're going to teach the essence of education. That's already existing right now. Teacher welfare and brain drain. Teacher salaries lag behind private sector counterparts. It's because you're overworked yet underpaid, and then teachers are expected so much of the problem. Therefore, there's a lack of ongoing professional development and burnout, and there's migration of skilled professionals abroad because there's due to low local opportunities. So sometimes they go abroad because of the less access towards these things. Because I think the misconception is that the moment you pass your LPT, you become you get more offers towards education and school. That's not true. The problem is, especially in secondary education, teachers are given items. Items are just basically the offers in which they're able to participate in the schools that they're going to go by. So, if it's an item, sometimes items expire. So, teachers then go out of the school that they worked in because there's already replacement for or a less demand for the specialization of these teachers. And sometimes in rural communities, they don't hire the local teachers that graduate from their schools. They hire the they get external hires. So, for example, in CSU, most of the faculty compromises from graduates of CMU, IIT, UP system, for example, because they it ties back to how schools want to increase their quality of education, but also long-term wise, the outcome-based dependency is that they try to look towards how they're able to increase their ranking towards university rankings, but also in the a way they're able to create collaborative effort in education, which is still a problem, even if with good benefits, because there's a disconnect with the needs of the communities that you're more likely going to have. So, for example, if you're a community that is most likely in agriculture and your school and your university is contingent to agricultural degrees, most likely there's there's less incentive for these schools to hire agricultural center teachers because they still need to opt in towards the globalized standard of what education curriculum should be. So they steer away from agriculture, they steer towards technology development and then science degrees programs, which is a problem because it loses the incentives of what these local teachers are more likely going to offer. So there's less incentives towards the connection between the education curriculum and the community because education still views the community as an important factor towards creating inducive learning environments. Implications then. So because of a lot of these problems, there's also the ways on how we create community-based learning. So parang because of the problems, rural communities then face barangay reading centers and mobile libraries like Cariton Classroom or Balsabasa, or even in places like Butuan, or even in local government units, what they do because of the lack of education quality, they tend to tap into the higher universities that are able to lend their educators to do that. So for example, in Butuan, there are Turo Basa programs. So they tap Caraga State University, they select ongoing educators in the curriculum in the College of Education to teach young learners to read and and learn, for example. So parang there's a lot of discussions on the way these things are just generally trying to operate. There's also NGO-led programs like Gawad Kalinga School for Experiential and Entrepreneurial Development. And there's lifelong learning via TESDA community skills training centers, like I've told about earlier. Next is workplace and on-the-job learning. Right now, there's dual training systems. This looks like there's by batches in terms of how there's on-the-job training, and there's enterprise-based training supported by TESDA. So you try to learn technical vocational livelihood skills that are multifaceted. So it can be on textbook based learning, but it can also be on the job skill learning. And then company specific upskilling programs such as BPO sector training and retail apprenticeships exist. So there's already an evolution of how on the job training in terms of education looks like. But still, all of these things are in the lenses of development on what on what education perceives it as a priority, not more so on the community aspects and the needs that these things experience. There's media, technology, and digital learning. It's because of because of the pandemic, there's a need for digitalized discussions that happen. So parang then all of these things factor into how the discussions are more likely going to be better off in long run. So you get DepEd Commons, YouTube Edu PH, Knowledge Channel, and Eskwela Centers. You get media's education. We have Radio Eskwela, Teleradio, and Facebook Live tutoring. And we have problems because of that since there's a digital divide and there's an increase of misinformation and cyberbullying that happens on the ground. And not all communities have reached the ability to become fully digitized. So you may get smart libraries that are they use hubs to look for research articles that can look for the amounts of archives in the library. But there's still rural communities that don't have access to that. Kaya there's so many students who go out of the province in order to get proper tertiary learning, which causes a lot of buy-in in the top performing schools and causes a lot of these top performing schools to monopolize most of the budget. That causes a lot of these rural communities to get less of the budget, for example. Next is indigenous and cultural learning systems. So this is intergenerational knowledge transfer. So schools that are contingent towards fishing, weaving, folk medicine, because these are contingent to the needs of the community. And there's Indigenous groups education programs integration. It recognizes preserving ancestral knowledge. There's festivals, oral traditions, and rituals as learning platforms. Because, like I said, education as of now is learner centered. And if your learners are living in a community that is based on cultural diversity or there's religious affiliations, then most of your education systems are going to deviate from the standard in order to focus on the needs. But then again, because of the standard towards development, most academes and regional offices pressure these communities to focus on development in the exchange of absence towards these needs to be discussed in their education. So keynote, in the Philippine context, many classrooms still mirror a colonial legacy. Teachers Teachers knows all, students are passive. This is wrong. This hierarchy limits innovation and student empowerment, but learners are not empty vessels. They bring their own insights and identities in the classroom. So for example, to what we do right now in inclusive education, student-based learning. Imagine a child from an Aita community learning side by side with a student from Quezon City. The realities are different, and so must be the way we engage with them. And the teachers must listen as much as they speak. There's two-way types of discussions that exist, which means ah yeah, which means that education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Again, education encompass so many lenses and it's so many ways to argue education motions. It's not just simply the STEM versus arts majors. It's so much more. That's why I hope during this MPDC you value the discussions and education as much as how I value education and how I'm trying to impart you these types of discussions. So that ends my discussion on specialized lecture. Beyond the board, I look at education in the Philippines. Thank you so much. So look forward to seeing you in the 49th MPDC and MSU IIT. See you, good luck, and I hope you enjoy all of the motions.